have you guys ever tried to put on an event?
Yeah.
Attempted.
They're hard.
How many people were you trying to hustle up to get there?
A couple of hundred at best.
I am awful at putting on events. I did a couple, but this is why we need to find out how to put on an event. Because today we have Ben Anderson, gone from payday loans, concerts,
Going straight in there.
with 50 Cent, Snoop Dogg, Ed Sheeran,
Big dog.
capacity 18,000 plus.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a journey.
For those who are listening who may not have come across your business, and given the numbers, they should have by now, and they will definitely after this. Talk to us, what is your company and how is it run?
So the company's called Musicalize.
Yep.
We are a concert and live events promotions company.
Yep.
That's the core of what we do. So we put on live events.
And how did you and your co-founder come up with this idea?
So co-founder is my now wife.
Wow, look at you.
Nice.
Why, he chirps like your business partner? How did that happen?
Did you work together before you
So
decided?
we didn't know. So I'm originally from Birmingham. Sophie,
hear it a bit.
yeah,
Hear a little bit, innit?
the
He
actor-
tried to cover it
Mask
in.
it, trying to
Why are you
mask
trying to mask it though? I used to go to Small Heath. I used to grow up in Small Heath, so I
that's
know
where
it
my
deep.
nan lived.
Yeah, man. It's
So
a big thing.
the joke is, everyone says that Sophie's over the time just beaten the Brummie accent out of me.
So you're under the thumb.
Yeah, a little bit. Let me just admit
Get
it
it
now.
out now.
Get out there now.
She'll
Listen,
listen
get
to
out there.
this and she'll be like, "Why did you?
Why do
say
you lie?
that?"
Why you lie?
So around 10 years ago, I was working in Birmingham, but commuting to do a job in London occasionally. Sophie and I met on a night out via a mutual person, and we kind of hit it off. And when we started going out, music and events was kind of our thing to do. We just loved going. It was a really exciting time, sort of like 10, 11 years ago.
Did you fall in love with her first sight?
I don't even think it was that. That's really
Was
bad.
there more
Is that
common
bad?
ground?
No, it's not, you got to be honest.
It is now. It's
I
captured
hope
on.
you fancied
Yeah.
her. Though. You fancied her, or did you grow to love her?
I think that was the same for both of us. I don't think it was like an initial. We've spoken about this, and I don't think we had that.
You're not each other's type then.
Yeah, we are
Obviously
actually.
are.
They obviously are. They're
It's a-
married, innit?
Initially.
I got a 4
It's a
pitney.
very unfair.
Oh no, initially. I hear what you
He
say. I hear
admitted
you.
it. He
So-
said both
Yeah,
of
yeah, no,
us,
I hear you,
we
I hear you.
grew to, it wasn't instant like, oh my God, she is so hot.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe just where we were in our lives at that particular time. We weren't looking for anything.
something, yeah.
So, I think it just very organically happened. The thing with Sophie was that once we got talking, like we could just talk on the phone for hours and hours. It was just like, and that process of getting to know someone, I feel like we just ramped through all of that so quickly.
Love that.
And yeah, going to gigs was kind of like just our thing. The reason I say it was really exciting 10, 11 years ago is because all of the household names that we all know now, so like your Ed Sheerans, your Sam Smiths, your Jessie J's, your Tiny Tempers, we were watching these guys performing to like a couple of hundred people.
So they were just emerging at that time.
Yeah, so they're literally at the start of their journey. The live music scene in London was just incredible. Coming from the Midlands, where we didn't really have much in that way, I was massively excited by this, this new world. And I guess there was this. I guess for me, when you're in the same room as people that you've heard on the radio, or that you might have seen in an interview or read in a magazine or something, that was really exciting. My background was banking, and I just never sort of operated and been in these spaces, and to kind of just come in and slot in. And I always say to people that Sophie and I didn't really realize it at the time, but because we were at so many events, and you start to, see the owners of other companies or other, events, promotions companies, etc., you just get to know people. And so we were kind of like inadvertently networking.
Without realising it,
do you know
but
when people,
because you had a love for it.
Yeah, do you know when
didn't
people say,
feel
oh,
like
like, I'd love to be able to network and I want to go to networking events. These music events weren't networking events, but the more time you spend around people.
They were.
That's
It's
how
just
it is.
networking is the
creative
word
stuff.
you use to formalise that process.
Yeah.
What you're doing, you're walking around, you're making friends, you're getting used to people, you're making your face known, and actually you just blended into that environment.
Exactly, and I think I can't remember the exact point where I'd had an interest in doing something in the music space whilst I was in the Midlands. There was me and a group of guys who, it's so funny looking back. We set up this website. It was my mate's idea, called the Music Folder, which basically he was trying to do a streaming website for music. But there was nothing legal about the way that we were doing it. We were literally going on.
Was it the time of like LimeWire?
Because LimeWire was like Spotify for us.
Exactly. So basically, we would go onto
I never
LimeWire,
touched it.
download the music, and then upload it to the music folder. And I just remember I think there was 4 of us, and we were like, take a genre each and just download as much music
What was
as
your
you
genre?
can. Bashment and dancehall.
Come on.
I want to see this thing. I want to see Ben do the butterfly. You know?
Which to me like really surprises me, because I'm now so like I'm just not as clued up on that. Yeah, I'm so far.
Is that your culture? Is that your culture?
Not even necessarily. I don't even know how I ended up there. You know, that was. I mean, my dad's Jamaican.
Okay. So there you go.
So maybe it was just in the blood.
Yeah.
Did he not listen to like reggae?
Yeah, reggae was always. Music is kind of always.
Sunday mornings you're gonna get woke up to
reggae.
Yeah, some music in our house growing up was a thing.
When you met your missus now, you were banking and the location was Birmingham, but you met her in London.
Yes.
And then when did you have that conversation with her to say, we're going to gigs all the time, we're networking, we love it, this could definitely be work? When did that happen? And you move from Birmingham to London?
So even at the point where we'd put on our first few events as under this umbrella of Musicalize.
Who came up with the name?
I think we both kind of came up with the name. Sophie came up with the initial logo. She literally drew it on a piece of paper. It was like the word Musicalize with like a microphone underneath, like the E squiggles.
I was trying to work out
but the concept of it was, because I said, let's come up with, talking about networking. I was like, let's introduce an element of networking into our event. So we came up with this concept that people would turn up, they would, for the first hour, 7 till 8, it would be all about just getting to know who was in the room, you know, get yourself a drink. If you plan to meet someone at the event, do it at that particular time. And then from 8 till 10:30, 11, that's when the live music would happen. So we wanted it to be music and socializing, hence Musicalize. That's literally the thing there. So going back to your question about when we kind of had that whole conversation,
when you were going to leave your
when I was going to when I was going to leave my job and when Sophie was going to leave, I think it was at some point during the first year. Basically, I would come to London, put these events on, and then drive back to Birmingham and go to work the next day.
Wow. Too much.
Literally like nothing had happened. And I remember my boss at the time, she was kind of she was becoming more aware that I was spending less time away from the Midlands. And I mean, like literally I would be getting home at 3 o'clock in the morning and then going to work at like 8 o'clock the next
Your performance
day.
suffering?
Not suffering, but she could tell I wasn't enjoying the job. So the international travel had started to die down, because I'd pretty much done all the countries where we had places. And then I was now in a role where I was travelling to like Manchester or you know somewhere.
Not like Sydney, basically in
Not
December.
Sydney, yeah, no. It was nowhere near as glamorous.
Money.
And then we had an office in Amersham, which is sort of like just outside.
Aylesbury.
Yeah, that way. Which I loved going there because I was closer to London, so I could leave the office and then just go out.
So you were getting drawn.
I was getting drawn into it, and
the big lights.
I remember her saying to me, "You're not going to be here for much longer, are you?" And I was like, "No." I was like, I'm committed to this role. Like,
were you fooling
6 months.
yourself? Or?
Yeah, because I remember saying to her, I'm going to stick here for at least 6 months, and then the next performance review, which may have been about a month and a bit later, I just said to her, I just want to go off and do this music thing.
So then, from you both having quite good jobs to then wanting to set up Musicalize, what was the conversation around why you needed to, you know, borrow loans? Because was the first few events not successful why you had to do the payday loans?
I'm glad you mentioned the payday. So the payday loan thing, I think I spoke about this on Twitter once when I was explaining the way that we put on our first event. So we've got no music experience, as in, you know, we're not tech people or anything like that. So one of the challenges that we were having for our very first event, which was the 28th of April 2011,
A lifetime ago.
a lifetime ago, was we couldn't find a live music venue to do the show. They'd all been booked up. We were trying to put this event together on quite short notice. And then when we did find a music venue, we almost ran into problems because the first headliner that we booked was Getz. So Grime MC. Our little spin on things was booking Getz with a band. Which hadn't really been done.
You were pre-symphony orchestra
We
stuff.
were like literally. I'd heard of one other event that had booked Getz to do that. I didn't go to that particular event, but I'd heard that it was good. And
He's
I was
really
just
good
like-
with a band, though.
Yeah, and he always has been because
I used to do BVs for him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So his brother Kadeem he's basically his
MD,
MD.
yeah.
And you know those guys, they grew up in the church, and you know they're very, very, very good with the band stuff. And we were like, this is kind of the soft approach to getting a grime MC, because again, 2011, people tried to warn me about this from London and say you can't put a grime MC in a venue in London because it will get shut down. And I was like, no, it's cool, it's cool. That won't happen.
Risk assessment.
Yeah,
all that,
696 form and all of this. And I remember literally, so we ran into a few issues along the way, in fact, in regard to that. I even remember the venue that we ended up picking, it was called Alto, which, using my head at this moment in time, that wasn't even a live music venue, it was a nightclub.
Nightclub.
Yeah.
It's a
Where's
nightclub.
Alto
That's how I
again?
know.
Do you know Carnaby Street, Ganton
Yeah,
Street?
yes,
I think
yes,
it's
I do
Circular.
know Alto, yes, it is,
Yeah,
it is, yeah.
So literally, so that's the venue that we've used, and it looks the part.
Yeah.
Like they had like this. I think they were
Very
sponsored-
Mayfairish clubby.
Yeah, I think they were sponsored by like Belvedere or something. So there was part of the club that was, which we were going to use as the green room, which was like the VIP area, and that's where we were going to put all the artists. We were drawn to it.
And the whole VIP concept tables were not that big then,
No,
was it?
not at all. It was, you know, and I remember us having we found the flyer for that first event not so long ago when we were clearing out at home, and I think we did have like a standard ticket option and a VIP option, and it must have been that I think the VIP gave you access to the after party or something that we did, but the venue was just a really interesting one because I remember us sitting down and having a meeting with the venue manager, and when she found out who the headliner was, she basically turned around to us and was like, I don't think we're going to be able to do this event here.
And how much before the event was this?
This is like weeks to go. So we basically got Getz to do a promo video that he put out on YouTube. And somehow the venue found out about it, and she was
that's
like,
the point
And they
that
got
triggered
worried.
them to
she
say,
was like, "Can you take it down?" And we were a bit like,
Did she not know who Getz was in the beginning?
"No,
no,
I
but I
don't
think she does know. That's the whole reason why she had the caution.
And it's weird because,
No, she was all right to give you the venue initially.
yeah.
but she didn't know Getz was part of it.
and I guess Sophie and I we'd never done an event before, so we were looking at the situation and understanding the boxes that you need to tick for, you know, to be able to put on an event. And because our event,
Or do you mean a black event?
yeah, I was going to say,
Because it's not an event. Because essentially, do you think she would have had the same issue if you were? Because the first four names you mentioned, they were white artists.
Yeah.
So if there was, what was a?
I don't know, yeah, but it was
Let me
grime-
finish
it
my
was
point
grime,
though. The whole
though.
point, if it was, what did you
so
say?
we were talking about like Sam Smith,
The other
Ed
one.
Sheeran,
Sheeran,
Jessie
Jesse,
J.
if it was
Yeah.
Jessie J, would she
wouldn't-
have had the same
we
issue?
wouldn't
Is
have
that
had
a
this.
race
Yeah.
thing, though?
No.
Because what about Devlin? Devlin
Well,
was grime
I
as
tell
well.
you,
No, but
I tell you
Jessie
why I
J
know.
and Getz-
I tell you why I know that there was a racial element to this, because I sat down in a meeting.
So can you say that to Lynn, please?
I want to hear the story.
There was a
I want to hear
racial
what you're going to
element to
say.
this, because I remember sitting down with this lady, and she was no further away than what you guys are sat from me now. And Sophie and I sat here, and she said to us, "What do you think the crowd is going to be like that have
Yes.
come to this
Yeah.
event?" And we
And
were like,
that's a microaggression.
Oh.
That for me is a microaggression because she would never have asked that question.
What music-
if it wasn't that artist?
what music you
Yeah.
got. So when we started listing, you know, and we had, so Getz was kind of like the name. He was the most well-known artist.
Was he still
on
known
there.
as Ghetto then?
No, he was
He
Getz.
transitioned.
Yeah, he transitioned at that point. So he was the softer version. And we basically
was
kind
a
of
bad
filled the
man.
rest of the bill with other artists. It was a real mishmash in terms of genres. We had R&B singers.
What, at the same event?
At the same event, we had a girl that...
it was live music
was-
rather
yeah, it
than
wasn't-
catering to
Yeah.
a
Eclectic,
particular.
wasn't it?
That's
Yeah.
it. That's why I said it was an exciting time, because you could go to a gig and it didn't matter whether the girl who opened the show was an acoustic, singer-songwriter from Leeds, who I'd found on YouTube, called Hannah Trigwell. She's like so far removed from Gets, but it just worked, you know. But I remember sitting opposite this the venue manager, and she asked us about the demographic that would be coming in, and her words to us was that she wanted the Essex crowd in, because apparently the Essex crowd spend money.
Yeah.
You know, it was very much that West End nightclub approach.
Yeah.
And she wasn't even taking into consideration that we weren't massively, you know, we weren't concerned about bar spend and things like that. But yeah, there was a racial element to it. She was talking percentages.
Yeah.
You know, like,
Yeah.
we want
This amount.
60% Essex crowd. You know, we don't.
Does that mean AKA white?
Yeah, which we don't mind what the other 40%
Yeah.
is, but
I think we have to call this out, because the thing is, the reality is that that didn't stop you from putting on the event.
No.
You carried on doing that.
Did
because
she still let you?
Yeah, still let us do
At
it.
Alto, yeah?
At Alto, and you know, the event went completely fine. We had no issues.
Well done.
And we've never, you know, to this day had any issues like
Issues.
that. And I think a lot of that is just down to, you know, we take things like security very, very seriously. And also, we don't mess around when it comes to artists. I think the problem that you are having at a lot of events, or that can happen, is when, you know, someone comes along and brings 20 man on a guest list, you know, to come and hang out backstage. And
Who knows who they are?
We don't run our events like that, because, you know, from our side of things, Sophie and I have always looked at it that we're only as good as the last event. So if something kicks off at a Musicalize
finished.
event,
That's
then
the
you have to
problem.
change you have to change the name.
It's funny you
Every
should
day.
say
Over
that, because
again.
I remember there was a big concert in Brixton. I'm sure it was a Jarul concert or something, and he came with a massive entourage.
So
And
they
then-
Jarul.
Is it Jarul?
Jarul.
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 I was thinking
Same difference. Same guy. You know what I meant.
I had to check. I thought you meant that. I had to check.
Yeah, I wasn't a big fan.
Yeah.
And,
I don't think many people are Fire Festival. What?
And then I'm sure that he brought a massive entourage, and there were all sorts of trouble. So, you know, with that in mind as well, because obviously you moved on to bigger and better things pretty quickly, and actually built relationships with artists from across the other side of the Atlantic. So how did you mitigate that same sort of risk?
It
with
was just about
bigger
being
stars?
completely upfront with like their teams, and just saying, look, we can only allow for this many people backstage. You know, whenever we do a show, it's multi-act, so you know there's going to be lots of people. The Americans, yeah, they travel in bigger numbers.
They're bigger riders.
What's really interesting is that I always find with Americans, it's not necessarily the travel party, because as the promoter, you got to pay for them to get here, so you kind of keep the travel numbers down. But it's when they land in London,
They find people.
or people find them,
And they just
you know,
tag
people
along.
just latch onto
Just
them.
bring me this one.
Yeah, so suddenly like the guest list for the artist is getting longer and longer, and we're like, okay, so what does this person do again? And they're like, oh, that's the stylist, but it just happens to be some guy who's
Fancies the girl.
tagging onto them from the airport,
guy.
basically. It's weird. So we just try to. I mean, we're very respectful, but we do take quite a tough approach in that regard. And
So where's the business now? What stage is the business
And
at
if
now?
it was successful, if it was successful initially, because I can't hear any hiccups why you'd have to refer to loans.
Yeah. So going back to the loan thing. So first event, we get a call from Alto. The night before they had a club night, the speakers had blown. We hadn't factored.
Not
this
'cause
is-
of you-
Not
nothing
'cause
to
of
do
us.
with
Nothing
you.
to do with us. So the
that's
speakers
a
have
sound
blown,
check and a
and
half,
they're now
isn't it?
saying
Imagine.
to us that unless we can get some equipment in, they're not going to be able to run it through their main speakers. This is the ultimate naivety, because we have booked, you know, people playing with bands, and I'm literally thinking it's like a plug and play situation, like plug an aux into, and it's going to come
And
out.
it'll come out
the
the sound, get
speakers.
it? Yeah.
So
This ain't a barbecue.
this is like looking back at it is just the craziest thing. So basically, we phone. I didn't know anyone who worked in music other than my uncle, who had some connection to the music industry. So I phoned him up and I said, I've been told by this venue that we need a tech guy tonight. He was like, take this guy's number. His name's Jimmy. Give him a call. Tell him what you need, and he'll sort it out for you. So I called Jimmy. He's like, you need to speak to this company called John Henry's, one of the biggest suppliers of like, you know, the tech equipment at events. Tell them you want all of this. Tell them where you want it delivered to, and I'll be there. at 5 o'clock to help you set it all up. I can't remember how much it came to, but you're talking somewhere in the region
not
of
cheap.
like close to £1,000.
But you didn't care. You were like, this event has to
It's
happen.
the only way it's going to happen. If
you
we didn't
committed
have the
to it.
equipment, we
Yeah.
wouldn't have been able to do it,
Yeah.
and we would have had to cancel the first event, which was never an option. So, yeah, money. Sophie and I were both in jobs, but what we'd done is we'd put a deposit down with the venue, which they were holding. That was the first question we asked them. Can we have our deposit to use for the tech equipment? They were like, no, because that's the bar spend.
You're helping them out
deposit.
in a way, though, as well.
It is. When we phoned John Henry's, the other thing that we hadn't factored in, 28th of April 2011 was the day before William and Kate got married.
Aye.
Do you remember there was street
parties.
parties everywhere?
Everyone had the equipment and stuff.
So everyone had hired equipment to set up for their own street party. So equipment was in very, very short supply. John Henry's, because of how huge they are, did manage to have it. But I think we were paying a premium, and because we needed it within a few hours, it was there. So I picked Sophie up from her flat in Croydon. I'm now thinking, where can we get the money from? The only thing I'd remembered was that there were a number of payday loan shops down Streatham High Street. I had my pay slip in my bag from work. I had some ID. Walked in, and it was like, couple of hundred there, couple of hundred at the next one. And that's literally how we got the cash together to
Scratched it all
to
together.
literally pay.
Risk.
And literally, John Henry's wouldn't go into the building until they knew that they'd been paid. Jimmy wanted to know that he was getting paid that night as well. So it became this big rush at about 5 o'clock, 5:30 on the day of the event to get all the equipment set. And when I look at what the desk that Jimmy set up, I'm like, how on earth did I think this event was going to go by just plugging and playing, stuff into...
Is he still on the firm, Jimmy? He sounds like a good man.
So
to know.
so Jimmy,
Next time you have a party.
Jimmy,
Oh,
I
really?
bumped. So a really random story. I got taken to a. This is the most random event I've ever been to, but I got taken by an investor that we were doing some work with to a Boy George concert at Wembley Arena
Do you like
last
Boy
year.
George?
Not a fan, but he's a very good
Hey,
performer.
this is the early stuff. listen.
Yeah,
I like it.
I think
got
it was
no
like
shame.
a
Oh, I love that.
culture club reunion or something like that.
You youngsters.
And so I'm standing. So the investor that I know, he's really good friends with Boy George's manager, a guy called PK. And so we're standing literally on the floor in Wembley Arena, but we're literally behind the sound guys. And I'm looking across, and I can see this guy, and I'm thinking, why do I know that guy's face? And it's Jimmy. So he's still doing his thing, and he's an incredible guy in this space.
But
With the two, I mean, because what I'm seeing as well is this, it's a bit of a power couple. And as much as, obviously we're lucky we've got you sat here today, but I almost feel like Sophie should be stepping in at some stage because, and you're very, honest and open to say that it's something that you've built together. She sounds like an amazing woman.
Yeah.
Would you have done it without her?
No, definitely not. And it was interesting when I talk about sort of our early, days within music, as being the guy from Birmingham coming to London, and you mentioned earlier, kind of getting excited by the lights and everything. I think there was a point very early on where I could have been the one that got swept up in the whole excitement of the music industry.
No direction.
Just the amount of people that I met in the early days that would go to gigs and events like every single day for years and years
Enjoying
and years.
it, no business.
And no business.
Come out at the end of it with no money.
Nothing.
A
Just
whole
there
list of
being a
parties
mini
they've been at.
socialite on the scene.
And you know what?
Mini
And
socialite.
I've genuinely been thinking about this group of people during like the whole pandemic thing, because if you're the person that is just known for going to events and being seen, and you really enjoy that whole thing, what have they been doing for the last 6 months?
Saving some money.
Well,
Yeah.
But it was just really frustrating, over the course of years of like seeing people and then them talking to you about a business idea that they've got here and they're going to do this. And then you see them a few years later and then they're still talking
further
about it and they're no further forward. And that's maybe not want of trying, but I just think London and the music industry, it can be a very exciting place to be, but the amount of people that just hover around it and don't really do anything.
wash
But
over.
do you know what I find quite interesting is that the reason why you've managed to do so many concerts, And because, you know, some people, they'll open a nightclub or do a concert and their name and brand gets tarnished instantly. Like you said, whether they've got random people turning up, allowing certain things to happen, you know, all that sort. And one of your parents is a police officer, aren't they?
She works for the police force, yeah.
Who works for the police force. So has that ever been in the back of your mind? Because let's say, for example, I know someone starting out in events. You've managed to get a really big act. This act has friends that does a bit of drugs. You don't want to lose this act. So, you know, you might, as an event organizer, you may turn a blind eye to someone bringing drugs on the premises, weapons on the premises. There's a lot that goes in, and this is nothing to do with race specific. This goes from heroin, cocaine, knives, through all races. Have you ever had that, my mum works with the police, I need to really be careful about this as my family name?
I'll be honest, I just didn't really go into it. I didn't give it that level of thought.
Yeah.
It was never that calculated. For me, it was more just about the brand name.
Yeah.
Like it was Musicalize cannot have anything as
Negative
like you can't
connotations.
Google Musicalize and see that there was like a stabbing or something like that at one of our events. Because I just didn't think that there would ever be a way that you'd be able to recover. You know,
because that
something
reputation is so hard to get, but so easy to lose.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what the media's like. The way I just imagine the way that it would be spun, and you know the way that they would talk about us as a company if anything like that did happen. So
what were you worried about?
I guess the big thing is just any trouble at an event. That's kind of the big thing.
And if you can come back from it.
Yeah, but it sounds like it's more. Is it because you as a black owner of an event would get associated with negative connotations?
100%. I think Sophie's white, so you know, I think there's kind of always that things will always be softened a little bit.
Yeah.
I guess me and Sophie going, I'll give you an example. When that whole 696 form, which was in place, which was basically a form that you had to fill out, documenting who was going to be performing, whether they were a performer or a DJ, you'd have to fill this out and hand it to the venue. The venue would then give it to the police, who would check everybody's names on there. If anything flagged, that would either increase the security risk, so you'd have to bring in extra security, or if it was a severe risk, they could just say, sorry, we can't do that event.
Yeah.
That team was being run by these two white ladies, you know, middle-aged white ladies in a little office somewhere in London. And there was one event that we had an artist who flagged on this, and they were going to say that we couldn't do it. The same thing had happened when Live Nation had tried to put on his tour. His London date got cancelled, and they ended up cancelling the whole of his UK tour. This was an artist who was really hot at the time. And we took the initiative of saying to him, we want you to perform. Music is your thing. You know, this is how you now want to make money. Yes, you've had like checkered past and, you know, a couple of things that have gone on, but we need to get to the bottom of this. So we physically picked him up and took him to go and meet these ladies and sit down and go, how do we get past this?
Because you're holding him back.
Because you are literally stopping this guy from making money the right way.
Yeah.
And do you know, I don't think that there's many promoters that have done that.
For that person.
For that person. And then even, you know, at the biggest level, you know, your AEGs, your Live Nations, your SJMs, I don't know all of these, you know, the owners personally, but I don't know whether the owner of these companies are going and picking up an artist and taking them to go and sit down and have a meeting with the police.
To help them make money.
Because it's not just for your benefit, it's for
for theirs as well. So you said having Sophie, who's white, you're a white wife, it softens things. So
I believe, you know,
when you put her in those white spaces,
it would be naive of me to say that, you know, if it was two black guys that had gone in to have those meetings, would we have had the same outcomes? I don't know.
Possibly not.
Yeah.
You know, that's the reality. So
you're saying it softens
I'm just always
you're
saying
aware.
that I'm always, the one thing that I can't have people say is that that's the only reason that we're successful is
Yeah, of
because
course not,
I'm black and she's white.
Have people
whatever,
said that?
but people say all sorts of things about us.
Have they
as a
said that
company.
specifically?
People think we haven't had the same struggles as promoters because of the dynamic.
Has it made things easier though that she's white?
I don't think it. I don't. That there's no. I think our professionalism is what's made the difference.
And you must want to defend your wife, because essentially that's taking away from the hard work and effort
that you've
you've
seen.
invested
And
in.
also,
Yeah, but
what's
in
really
terms of,
interesting-
like,
what's really interesting is that when people think of Musicalize, and Sophie will admit this, you know,
Yeah.
she's very much like behind the
end,
scenes. I'm like almost the face of it. So if anyone like comes into contact with us via social media, it's more likely that they'll know me. Whereas the artists, the managers,
Will know
the
her.
tour managers,
Yeah.
the agents will all know Sophie because she does the, you know,
Yeah.
she pieces it all together. I just turn up and.
But you can't
At the event.
categorize your professionalism, your tenacity, you being driven and hungry and passionate about that. But I was only picking up from when you said it does soften it, and we'd be ignorant to not know that the biggest struggle is black women. They have the biggest struggle at the moment. So
Correct.
whether you had a dark-skinned black wife, would it have been as easier if you had a white wife in a Western society?
Who knows?
I think it would have made it easier if he had if it was a woman. That softens it. Having a woman stand up, because two men
Yeah.
going in is a very different conversation
Okay,
from a
yeah.
man and a woman. But I
Yeah.
definitely also take your point. Having a white woman being able to articulate and advocate for a business would add something, but that's part of your makeup.
Yeah.
If that's your je ne sais quoi,
Yeah.
that makes it. So do you know what?
Have you had
Let's-
any criticism from maybe like the black community or?
Not really. I mean, I think the interesting one is when sometimes Musicalize will get referred to as a black-owned business.
Yeah, how do you deal with that?
Which,
Oh, that's an interesting pillow talk.
Yeah, because
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
it's, you know, it's
Sophie
not
don't
really.
exist.
Yeah, I think that's the social media.
it a mixed race business
Echo
then?
chamber. Well, maybe that is the best way of describing
Come
it.
on, Joe, mixed business.
Taking over the world.
You know, I think that's the reality, and I'm always very conscious of like.
Inclusion.
I never describe it as that. And if someone does call it that or ask me to do something, because I'm like, you do realise that Sophie's the co-founder.
and she's white.
You
Yeah.
know, and
Would
stuff
you
like
turn something, if you say received an award for one of the best black owned businesses, would you decline it because one of the owners is clearly not black?
Yes, I would.
Payday loan at one point, as minor as it was for Ronnie and his mates and everything. Where is the company now? What's
Is
the
it still
numbers?
ticking over? Yeah.
So
Yeah,
still
what's the
ticking
numbers?
over. We basically, after our first year, we brought in a private investor.
Yep.
He came in as a director, invested. I remember this meeting so clearly because I got introduced to him via another guy that was on a speaking panel for like young entrepreneurs. We were both young entrepreneurs at the time, and he was in property, I was in music. He loved what we did, and we walked back to the station afterwards together, and we just got talking. And he said to me at that show, after that event, he was like, "What could you do if I gave you £25,000?" Bearing in mind, up until this point, our events were like sub £5,000 to put on.
Yeah.
I'm like, when I heard 25 grand, I was like,
Enough.
we could do so much. We could do this. we
Pitch
could do
mode,
that,
pitch
we
mode.
could- Yeah, literally. But we're getting closer and closer to Old Street Station. And I'm running out.
I need
of
to
time.
close him. I need to close him. I need to close him.
So I said to him, like, let's swap email addresses and I'll send you a proposal. So we sent a proposal for an event that would cost around £25,000, which was basically us going from, you know, the 500-600 capacity. The only event that we'd done bigger than that at that point was an Ed Sheeran event where we sold 3,500 tickets. So I used that as the model, and I said, look, you know, we could do a show at Indigo at the O2. These are all the costs. Let me know what you think. He liked it. Introduced me to this guy called Steve. Steve and this guy basically partnered up, and they both put in the amount to make it like 25k. So we did this event with Professor Green at Indigo at the O2. Professor Green plus support, bunch of UK acts. I think Krept and Conan were on that show.
Early days,
Chip
yeah.
was on it. We had Misha B. She was on it. This is what I mean about our shows, but still being very, very eclectic at that time. And when we did that show, I remember off the back of the event, Steve got his return, and he literally just said to us, right, rather than doing like 25 grand here and there, he was like, what could you do with 250k?
Come on.
And
Blows
we were
your
like,
mind, yeah.
this is
That was
Okay.
it.
Yes.
That was the moment, because I'd known that if you could get the right person to believe in the business, that would make all the difference. And that's what he invested. You know, he put that money in, and he basically then ended up, you know, what that did for us was, rather than us doing an event, getting the money back,
doing another
then
event.
doing another event. It was, I remember us
Capacity.
booking 3 events in a row, and they were all very similar genres, you know, like the UK urban acts, all at Indigo. So suddenly it was like Musicalize at Indigo, the O2, UK urban acts, right the way
like the
through. So
resident.
basically, after every event, we were promoting the next one.
And who was your competition? Obviously, Live Nation's huge, but
Yeah.
who would you say is like your competition?
So do you know what?
Or was anyone like, who do they think they are coming through the ranks?
These were the conversations that were happening, because in the early days when we were doing, you know, shows at Cargo and, you know, all of the smaller live
good old
music
Cargo,
Cargo, jeez.
and Troy
you know,
Bars and
yeah,
all
this
that.
one. So you might remember like I Love Live.
Yeah.
That they were going, you know, I think.
They still
certainly-
about?
They are, but in a very reduced capacity. So when I first moved to London, I Love Live was every Monday night.
Yeah.
The whole industry went down, and that's where
So
we met a
good,
lot
yeah.
of those like early artists.
You lot need to be going to work about every Monday night.
That's what it was.
Monday
It
night
was.
was I've got a
It was
sleep,
like
bruv.
the emerge of the creative scene, wasn't
Yeah.
it?
It was
it
a lot
was.
of spoken word stuff. And
Spoken
Yeah,
word, live
there
music,
was-
neo soul was huge
Exactly.
then.
There was a lot of that. Then it went to sort of bi-weekly, and then they started doing it monthly, because I think things were just changing. The landscape of live music was
Yeah.
constantly changing, and so we kind of slotted in there. I'd never been to. I think I'd been to a couple of I Love Live events and a couple of other
Like that.
live music events that were happening. But the one thing for me was that I just was always so focused on what we were doing that I didn't really pay attention. And I didn't view anyone else as competition, because I was like, well, these guys have all been around longer than us. So if they want to book someone, they'll get it much easier
Anyway.
than we will. Then we kind of, I guess we just, when we did the Ed event and sold 3,500 tickets, we kind of like skipped a step. I thought every event after that was going to be like the 3,500, but we had to go back a step and do some of the more smaller ones.
Yeah.
But the vision was just so much bigger. And all I remember saying when we did get that investment
Yeah.
was, how come no one else has kind of like done this? Why have, you know, some of these other companies that have got, you know, weekly or bi-weekly events, why are they not now concert promoters? And I still don't know the answer.
Maybe the vision wasn't as big as yours. It was
Potentially.
quite insular. But when you get quite a lot of investment, and this is like maybe an ignorant question, but do you know exactly where each one of those pounds of the 250 is going to? Or do you think, oh, 50 of that, I can use that for my own bills. It will help me in not having to concentrate on other jobs. I can buy a house with this.
It's really...
This is the business, man. It's not your personal business.
No,
that
No, but sometimes you think, okay, maybe not in house, but say, for example, you mix it, don't you? You think, I can use some of that for a car because I need a car because it's for business. And you start...
This is, you know what's really...
That's how some people might think.
I think
So
I can see
where you're
exactly
going.
Not
where
me.
you're going. And
Well,
I think...
of course not you.
No, but it's really interesting, because when you do land yourself in a position where you do have access to that kind of money, things do change. Like, don't get me wrong, it was, you know, suddenly, you know, I remember us thinking, of all the money that we kind of put away from events
Yeah.
to save, basically like our little bits of profit that we were like saving up, suddenly it was an opportunity to spend that money.
Yeah.
See?
Because now we've got the investors' money is taking care of
Yeah.
the business.
The day-to-day
So it's like
business.
the savings, you know, I remember us moving from moving from renting Sophie's old flat in Croydon, this one-bedroom flat, to moving to Stratford, and we move into a nicer building.
Because it's all a part of, isn't it? Your life
Because
is a part
now
of the
things are
business.
changing, you know, things are getting better, and then,
You're listening to
you
it.
know, I
I'm
remember...
listening, I'm taking notes.
I remember looking out the window of the apartment, and there was like another apartment building across the way that they were still finishing. And I was saying to Sophie,
We want that.
That's where we're moving to next. And, you know, a year later, we're living in the penthouse of that one because, you know, things have progressed.
And I had a look at your Instagram. You've got a nice big house now.
It's tidy. we've got
Well
a
deserved.
decent amount of square footage.
You need it for another picture you're having, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's
Ben,
true.
Just to close off, I suppose, you know, with regards to what comes next, obviously, where nobody really knows what's going to happen post pandemic and post lockdown. But for you, you know, where can we find you, and what sort of, you know, what's in the offing? What sort of big plans can you tell us about that you've got?
So Musicalize we're everywhere on sort of like socials around that.
We're everywhere.
We're everywhere. It's really interesting though, because as a concert promotions company, and we've been having this conversation during COVID. I'm working really closely with a guy on sort of like social media strategy, because for me, I was always a bit like, we're a concert promotions company, so when we've got concerts and events on, it's very easy to talk online about what you're doing. When you've got 6 months or 9 months or a year of no events, like how do you kind of keep the conversation going? So on Instagram in particular, we're trying to put some things in place where we're just kind of keeping the conversation going. We want to be known as a resource for all things music, whether that's UK music, US, whatever it is. Anything that's going on in the touring space, we talk about. But we are a young, fun company, so it's not just, I feel like we shouldn't just go onto like our social media and it's just a bunch of flyers for events, because it would be quite quiet at the moment, or it would just be loads of rescheduled. So we're kind of building that. And then in terms of what post-COVID looks like for us, there's some tours that we're working on behind the scenes that will hopefully happen in 2021. It's looking like, spring onwards is going to be an interesting time, and that's probably the point where we'll start to see a lot of these things. We've branched out in this time, we now promote podcasts and podcast
That's
tours.
huge now,
We're the official promoters for the 3 Shots of Tequila
really?
podcast. Yeah. So we've been working with those guys. We've taken them.
Have you seen any podcasts recently that
you want to promote?
Well, there's always those that are sniffing about. So let's have a conversation.
That's right. We want some deals, man.
But it's really interesting space in that, because if you think about an event, could a podcast show, a live podcast show, now lends itself better to a post-COVID world than a concert.
Because they're sitting down.
Because they're sitting down, and if you had to do it socially distanced, and you knew that you were going to do it socially distanced, then it's an interesting. So the show that I was talking about that we moved from May to December is a show at the Royal Albert Hall. It's 3 Shots of Tequila.
3 Shots,
It's their biggest live show.
Oh, are you doing that?
Yeah, so we're the promoter for that, and the conversation that we're having at the moment is basically we've sold too many tickets for if they did have to socially distance, we'd have to do 2 shows in one day. And then it's the whole conversation of, is that the right way to experience it? The Royal Albert Hall was such a big deal for those guys.
Yeah,
you want to experience.
So
fantastic.
And rightly
You want
so.
to experience the Royal Albert Hall
in all its
sold
glory.
out, with close to 5,000 people enjoying the show.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we get a free ticket.
We don't do free round here.
What? I like him.
That's how he sucks.
That's a
test.
businessman.
That's
That is
the
a
test.
businessman.
That was a test.
You know what? I saw a tweet the other day where someone in the music industry said that after COVID and once shows start happening, we all need to stop asking for guest
true.
lists.
Yes,
So true.
Because
Pay the
I
thing.
tweeted that as
You know,
well.
I say it all the time, when it's your
Respect
business.
your business.
Respect the thing.
And I think that's the point where, again, just one of the things that someone said to me once, that they found me quite scary and unapproachable, which I was really surprised by, because I think I'm quite an open person. But they were basically scared to come to me to ask for a guest list space. But it's because I talk so openly, especially on Twitter, and I'm like, look, this is our business. This is kind of our bread and butter. If you want to come to these events, like, support us, support the artist, buy the tickets.
Yeah, respect that.
And that's why this person was a bit like, oh, I didn't want to come and I'm like, no, but I know you, and I would.
So did you give them the ticket?
We let them use a box at an event that we were doing,
and lastly, I would love to know, you being from live music, what would you like to see the government do differently? Because we're trying to do a balance in that, aren't we? You don't want the virus to spread, but then this is your livelihood, and it's not just about you as the person, the organizer or the act. It affects lighting, sound engineers. It affects all behind the scenes. So what can the government do?
Well, I'd like them to actually acknowledge that this industry contributes so much to the economy. There's staggering amounts.
Do you not think they are?
I don't think they've actually acknowledged it, because and I consider us fairly fortunate in that we didn't have that many events in the diary on sale to have to reschedule. But if we did, we would have had huge issues up until this point. We've also got, and we haven't had a chance to talk about some of this stuff, but we've got sort of other revenue streams, which I think is also massively important for business owners to look into. So we've got other revenue streams. Had they not been there, we would have been down and out at this time.
Oh, so you're relying on your other business money?
So yeah, we're relying on, we're not making money from events currently. So, these other revenue streams of what have helped us kind of get through this time. I can't guarantee that those revenue streams are always going to be there, because they were always sort of like the backup fund
Secondary.
Anyway.
But that diversity in your portfolio
has definitely helped. And I think so. Yeah, I'd love the government to kind of just acknowledge that we have an issue in this. There are going to be so many companies that won't come out of this. My biggest problem, or the area that concerns me the most, is that the big beasts companies in this space, so your Live Nations, your AEGs, your SJMs, your Kilimanjaros, all of those, they are seasoned promoters with what I believe is, huge amounts of cash sort of sitting there ready to. Don't get me wrong, they have been affected more than anyone because of the volume of shows that they've had to do. But once all of this kind of dies down and tidies up, do these big guys then suddenly just hoover up all of the, the work that's there? And then you've got independent promoters like us.
It sounds to me like you're making massive waves. It's been brilliant to hear your story. I just want to thank you very much for coming to talk to us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Listen, love it. And
Thank
when
you
you get
so
to
much.
number 5, we'll come around to the house, yeah?
We still want
Let's
free
do
tickets,
it.
by the way.
Good to talk.
Likewise.